Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name's Joanne and David is behind the scenes with the technical support and doing the live chat, and I wouldn't be on air if it wasn't for him. Today we're going to talk about some basic search strategies using Basic Search, which is our catalogue, as you can see from this. So where do you find Basic Search? You find it on our website in a number of different navigation panels, but I tend to suggest people go to the dot point that says Search the Catalogue. So let's enter into Search the Catalogue and we come up with Basic Search. You'll see on the left navigation there's a number of other options. We'll talk about those a little later. So before we start, let's talk about what we've got here at State Archives for those who are new. So here is a bit of an overview. Records created by various Queensland Government agencies, including the courts, government departments, statutory authorities and so on. These archived public records from the government agencies are those that are seen to be needed for long-term value by researchers and others, the government agencies themselves. And most were created after 1859, although we do have some from the 1840s when Queensland was a convict colony, and some even earlier in the 1820s. The 1820s was when it was a convict colony. So how are the records arranged? Just quickly, they're arranged in the order that they're transferred to QSA. That is, we don't rearrange them. They come to us in series generally, grouped together by function or by subject, and they come with the finding aids that were created at the time of the record creation. Okay, let's go back now and start our searching. So I've got some examples here that I'd like to share with you. Feel free to interrupt. So first of all, I wanted to talk briefly about digital records, because we do have digitised records on the catalogue, but a very small fraction of the records have been digitised. So we'll just do a quick look at some of the digitised, or one example as a matter of fact. So this is searchable in Image Queensland, which is the subset of Archives Search, which is the proper catalogue. So I'll just type in a particular one that I've thought about, R. Gunn, who was a worker who came to Queensland in the 1900s to work in the banana industry. And I wanted to show you this because this application for his certificate of exemption, excuse the white space on the right side, is a really good indicator of the amount of information you can pick up from a small record, a single page. You can learn about where he was born, the place of his birth in the country of origin, his nationality, his age, and so on. And in fact you can work out from this the legislation that was behind this whole concept of an application for a certificate of exemption, which generally applied to the dictation test. So it meant that people, if they were not required to do the dictation test, they could come and work here because some of them wouldn't have passed. I'm going to just close this now, so just X out of that. We'll talk more about how you can get to something such as this, a digitised image from the catalogue, because we can get seamlessly from Basic Search or Advanced Search in the catalogue proper into Image Queensland, but we'll talk about that towards the end of this webinar, simply because the focus today is on how you find references to our paper records, which is fundamentally what we've got registered on here. Okay, so the catalogue tells you the QSA reference numbers that you'll need when you come to visit us to look at the non-digitised records. We like you to prepare, if you're going to visit us, do as much searching in Basic Search as you can, and ring up if you're having difficulty. You find our contact number under the Contact Us. And we can step you through because there's a phone service where we can help you at our desktops. So before searching, think about what you know and the names of the people that you're looking for. I've got an example here of a fellow whose name is David Death, who was a land selector. I've obviously chosen it because I know there's something in the catalogue, but it will give you an idea about what you find when you do your search. So I can in fact do it in either order, surname first or his first name first. I can change the to using exact phrase, but I won't do that because I don't know what order it's in. I can sort by date, but I won't need to do that because I know I've got a fairly limited number of results going to appear. And I always display 30 as a general rule of thumb. It's important to change that display. So we click on the search, and we notice that we've found nothing in the agencies as a match, nothing in the series. This is the way our records are arranged, as I've already mentioned in a broad sense. So I go to view results of the 5 that I've found, and I can see, yes, there is a land selection file for David Death in Goondiwindi, the Land Agent District of Goondiwindi, file number 78. So really you could just take that number and come visit us, but you'd also need this information as well to be able to find the item. It's on a microfilm as it happens. These very early selection records are on microfilm. So I'll enter into the record to see if I can find the microfilm number. I mean, it's only experience that tells me that there will be a microfilm number. So before we scroll down to get the microfilm number, let's just look at what's here. We've got the previous system location, and that first one before the semicolon we still use because that's the provenance arrangement, and that's the way the records are arranged on the shelves. And I'll show you a little later how you can actually use that record number in an exact search to find the item ID. So here it tells us also this is the preferred citation, and that's actually fairly important to remember that if you're going to be citing it, you need to cite it by that number in preference, and also along with the more specific departmental number. The date is just a date range associated with the series. So let's scroll down past the creating agency, which has subsequently become known as Natural Resources and Mines Department. So this was when the actual record was made. This is who we would go to now for permission because we're the custodians, not the owners of the records. So here's our microfilm number. So we take that number and then we're set to come to Queensland State Archives to do the searching. Now, if you're not able to because you're remote, and I know we've got people from Mackay, maybe other places as well, you can write to us once again and ask us to do a quote on copying. You can also fill in this form to get request a quote if you don't want to send an email. The email address is under the Contact Us. Okay, so now I'm going to pretend that I didn't get the microfilm number, so I've actually turned up. Sorry, David, yes, good question.
Chris wants to know, does that mean I should be going back and reciting all my really old searches using the preferred citation?
Well, no. Simply, yes. David's just told me a question from Chris. Thank you, Chris. Is there now a requirement for Chris to go back and change all his or her citations to accord with our new item ID system? No, archives are very much into, we work with what we've got now and we may add layers on top, but we make sure we can actually use what's been used before. As I said, and since the question's been raised, I'll just quickly go back to the item ID because I didn't have the forethought to write that number down, but actually I think I might have it here in my list. So let's try. So say, for example, Chris has used the previous system number for that David Death record in the citation, which is perfectly valid. There's no need to go back and change it. And he or she passes it to someone else, and they then come to us or want to search themselves using the previous system number. Simply type it into basic search, use the exact phrase pick list under using, and then click on search. And generally speaking, you should get it narrowed down to just one. In this instance, we didn't, but you can see how quickly I found it. I'll show you a couple more examples later of that previous system number, finding previous system numbers. So thank you for that. Oh yes, I did also, while I'm back at this screen, I'll just quickly go back into this record because I wanted to mention the concept of hierarchy, which isn't revealed on this particular page, but you can see all of these areas here which sometimes will be filled in, and we'll look at another example of that later because it can show you previous series, related series. It can show you the previous name of the agency and subsequent names as well, but that'll come up a little later. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about was just why now you might want to broaden your search. Say, for example, you were looking at the David Death record and you suddenly thought, well, maybe there's other records that are related that might be of relevance to me. So how do I find them is the question. So you might want to broaden your search to find other records created by that same agency, in this instance the Lands Department. You might want to find previous names of the agency. We already know the most recent is Natural Resources and Mines, or you might want to find intervening names that were used across the years between. And the other thing for broadening your search, you might want to find all items in a series. We always order at item level when we retrieve records, but there's no reason why you couldn't look at a whole series. So I'll go back to basic search now to show you an example of finding records in a series. So my example is going to be retrieve using ID, which is on the left navigation here. And my example has arisen because I've been looking at minute books for the Windsor Town Council. Now it's interesting, this is a slip that's created in our public search room. When we do the retrieval, some of you will have been to the public search room and you'll be familiar with the fact that we give you a client copy, and the rest of the slip that we produce is used to retrieve and mark out the shelves about what we've taken. So it's not entirely immediately clear what we're looking at here, but if you read the description, you'll see that it is the minutes or the minute books of the Windsor Shire Council, and it tells me the series number. It's very specific to the item, but if you look closely, you can always see the series number on the retrieval slips. So I'm just going to use that series number to retrieve all items in the series. Now, sometimes it's not as simple as this, and you don't just get 5, you can get thousands, and we'll talk about that later. So if I wanted to then view them, actually before I progress, I'll just show you that these are the names of the creating agencies and it gives the dates. And if you actually enter into the name of the agency that was responsible at a particular time, you can go to the description to get the administrative details, including the legislation. So I'll just go back and we'll enter into view items 5, just for the hell of it. And so you can see that we can decide what years we want to look at if we wanted to look at particular years. So that, as I said, that was nice and straightforward because there was only 5 in the search result. Let's pretend that we had decided that we wanted to look at the David Death, the series of records, the selection files that David Death's file belongs to. I've got that recorded here. Some of you would have noticed I'm such a terrible typist. There it is. So the David Death file is part of this series, selection files, that was created between those dates basically under the Alienation of Crown Land legislation. And you can see that there's a huge number. So there's no way we would be able to view them, but I wanted to just show you when you get an error message such as this, which warns you that you've got too many rows to display, and generally that stops at 1,000. It'll display up to 1,000, I think. I'm not sure about that now, but anyway, you don't want to be seeing that message. We then say to you, this is the time when we need to show you how to use advanced search. So we'll talk more about that another time. Okay. I now have on my list of things to do that I want to show you a bit more about the previous system numbers, because as we've already had someone kindly remind me, they're quite legitimate and they're used by academics as well as general researchers. And people don't know the difference. They don't really know when we've changed and we're suggesting that you use a different way to cite things. So we often get people asking, for example, this particular example I've got is for a Home Secretary's record. Just get into the box. Okay, so this is a previous system number, and that's the other thing that's worth noting, that it is Home Secretaries, so it starts with the three letters HOM. Coal Secretaries start with COL. Premiers, which was the subsequent agency, PRE. The trick here is it's really important. You must change it to say exact phrase, or the algorithm behind won't be clever enough to deduce. So as you can see, we've just got the one result. And this is a series of correspondence covering these letter numbers in 1919. I could either go back and modify, or I'll just progress forward and do another basic search for another example. And this one might be a little bit more difficult to interpret until you actually see. You'll notice that I haven't been displaying 30 because I know that there's only one. When you see what the record is, you'll see where the prefix comes from, MBQ. And I'll do one last one because this one here is quite a common one, so I will change it to 30, display 30. I mean, we do recommend you do that. We have so many immigration files that often you do find that you get more than one when you do this, but in this instance it's only the one. And then we would progress through to find whatever's there. Okay, so how are we going for time? That's about 20 minutes, isn't it? Yeah. So I'll continue now. So I'm going to take a slightly different tack now because I wanted to show you the concept of restricted access records. We haven't talked about that. So not all the records here are open, which means that you may be allowed to look at them, but you have to apply to the agency that's responsible for them, and it's to the discretion of that agency whether or not you get access. So what I was going to do is just give you a for instance. So a person is interested in Barkholden Court of Petty Sessions bench record and summons book records. My customer has already looked at 1917 to 1926, but has a requirement to look at 1964 to 1971. So it wouldn't automatically be clear to me whether or not that record's open or closed, and the only way you're going to know is to look on the catalogue. So we'll go in. I can actually show you how you would find that if you didn't have the series number. So there are a number of different ways you could do this, but putting keywords isn't a bad way. Don't include stop words such as the and generally it is often worth just truncating in case the spelling's unclear. So I won't change to exact phrase. I'll just change the display for what it's worth. It shouldn't make a lot of difference, I wouldn't think. Okay, so it didn't find it. So what I might change it to do is court petty session, because the early records would have been Court of Petty Sessions. So I've found the Court of Petty Sessions, and in fact it says it goes up to 64. So I'll enter into that and then find, I can do Control F to find on page. So there's the bench record and summons books series ID 8139. So I'll enter into that, and this is what I was meaning earlier about telling you a little bit about the hierarchy. So there's a related series, and there's a related agency, a subsequent agency rather. Okay, so I've scrolled down and I can see just at this minute that there's an 80-year access category on it, which means that its restricted access period is 80 years. So it's subject to a restricted access period of 80 years. So if I go into view items, because there's only 8, to see if in fact we have 1964 to 1971, client has already looked at 1917 through to 1926, and then the client actually wants 64 to 71. So I open that record, and it's got its own item ID, of course, and I see immediately that it's 80 years and do my calculations, and it's clear that that person would need to apply for access permission to the current responsible agency, and there it is there. But it's not as simple as that, because you can't just ring up that agency. You have to know the specific delegate, the authorised officer within the agency, and that tends to change over time. At the moment, the standard is for 2 years, but of course people leave as well, so things do change. So you really need to check with us any time if you want to apply for access permission, to make sure you've got the current information about the person to apply to. So that would be pretty straightforward. You just simply get in touch with us. So any questions about that, feel free to ask. Okay, so I might just sum up now, since we're getting close to time, and then we can talk about some other examples. I've got a couple of concrete examples that have come to my attention in the recent days. Of course, we're getting questions all the time, but I've just picked up a couple that I thought were really appropriate for this, so we'll talk about that in a minute. So to sum up, the files are searchable by family name. As you see, you can put either first name first or last name first. Sometimes less is more. You can use the truncation, the standard truncation symbol of the asterisk, if you're not sure whether the person was known by initials or by first name. You can use exact phrase for your precise number searching, bearing in mind that there's only about, I don't know what percentage, but it's not 100% accurate in terms of finding the number. And furthermore, it's dependent on you actually having any slashes or hyphens or whatever in the exact right place as soon as you say exact phrase. Change to 30 results on page. Hopefully new iterations of archive search will mean that we don't have to do that, it will be automatic. You may sort your results by date if you're getting too many and you want the oldest first, so it's either the oldest is first or the newest is last. That's a bit of a limitation there, but we can do more precise date searching with advanced archive search. More about that later in a later broadcast. Microfilm numbers you find on the item details page by scrolling down. And you can broaden your search using retrieve using ID for agency series. Okay. So I'll go back now to our page just to remind you of the information that we have under Contact Us in terms of getting in touch. We prefer you to write to us using our general inquiries online inquiry form, because the template prompts for specific things that make it useful for us to know where you are. We have a free research service. It's a non-charging, but it's not really free because it's staff time, of course. So if you can come in, we like you to. We've got really good social media contact methods now, as many of you would be aware of. So yes, thank you for watching, and I'll wait for questions. Thanks, David. But I'll quickly show you another example. As I said, I've got two here that are worth looking at. So we're sort of now on question time. If you wish to ask any questions, or if you want to send them offline using the Contact Us, by all means do. So earlier last week, I had a customer come into the public search room who asked me for Church Hill state school records, and I actually asked, how do you spell it? And he spelt it for me, and I didn't find what was there, because in fact it wasn't Church Hill, and it wasn't Church Hill, it was in fact Church Hill spelt in that fashion. So the way I could have got round that, if I'd been more on the ball about sort of saying, okay, well perhaps you're not spelling it correctly, which is always difficult to say to a customer, I could have truncated it and just done it as church, which would have found a lot, 1,000, so I don't want to do that. So I would have actually put the school as well, and the Boolean logic picks it up as church, whatever spelling, as a root, and the word school. And I could put the word primary, but the problem is that sometimes they're known as state schools. So I'll just leave it as school and see what that finds. And it found 37, which is quite manageable in terms of viewing on page, especially if you do 30 rather than just 10. So I'll go forward to page 2, and you can see there's the record that we're looking for. We hold them from 1923 to the present. So enter into the agency record, and with our school admissions, this is always the way to find it. Go to the school first, then look for the series admission registers, and there's 14. So then you go down to item level to find the specific year that you're looking for. So that's that example. The other one that's just been talked about, in fact, this is getting a little more complicated, and relates back to talking about digitised records, of which we have very few, because only a fraction of the 57 linear kilometres or so of our records have been digitised. But we have digitised some. They're in Image Queensland. We looked earlier at Argun. You could get to Argun through the catalogue proper. So if I typed in Argun exemption, I actually didn't do with the word exemption earlier when I tried this. But yes, by typing the word exemption, I've narrowed it down to one result. So this looks nothing like what we saw earlier, because it's the actual catalogue record. And it tells me here with this tick that it's been digitised. So we step through, following the hyperlinks, scrolling down. There's a lot of scrolling in our catalogue. And then we get a list, because they've not just digitised one record, they've also digitised many others that were applications or certificates. So I'll have to just do find on page to find our person. And there it is there at Innisfail. And so now we've seamlessly stepped through to Image Queensland, and we can look again at that record. So that's about me done, I think, David. So thank you everyone again. Thank you.
We might just stay online for a chat.
Okay.
I'll turn this off.
Yep.
And so if you just want to say that, we'll stay online for the chat.
Yes, we're going to turn off the camera now, and we'll be online for the next little while. Bye.
Okay.